This is John Glaser, Carroll class of 1998. He has more than 20 years of hospitality industry experience to Commerce Club Atlanta, having served as general manager of acclaimed private clubs like Nixon Bath and Racket Club in Charleston, South Carolina, and the club at Mariah Bay in Naples,
Mhm.
Florida. He is here to talk to us today about food service management and a career in culinary arts. So thank you, John, for being here, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Awesome. So, good afternoon or good morning, I guess. Still, it's been a long day for me already this morning. But I did hospitality for over 20 years now. Graduated from Carroll in 1998, and moved to Charleston, South Carolina, and went to Johnson Wales University. I got 2 degrees when I was there. I have a degree in baking and pastry arts, and I also have a degree in food service management, which is where a lot of my career has kind of developed from. So, left Johnson and Wales right after September 11th. So I saw the hospitality industry in one of its lowest points, hardest probably time in my life I thought to get a job. And so basically worked in a hotel just as a front desk person. That's what I was doing before I graduated. And then really went into front of house management kind of after that. I worked through a lot of culinary places when I was in college. So I worked at like a mom and pop restaurant. I worked at a bake shop at a 4-diamond, 4-star resort known as Kiowa, which if anybody follows golf, you've seen Kiowa on some of the tour championship play. And worked, a couple other restaurants that are just small in town, and worked as a line cook, worked as a dishwasher, worked as an executive sous chef, worked as a saucier. And then really just decided I wanted to get out of the back of the house and really manage operations. So moved to a hotel and was working at the front desk. And actually September 11th happened, and that kind of stopped everything. There was no job offers out in the market. So continued with that, and was actually working with a gentleman's wife, and she actually said, "Hey, we need somebody over at the baseball stadium." So I went and took a job at a minor league baseball park that's owned by Bill Murray and Mike Veck. If anybody's familiar with baseball, Mike Veck's dad owned or ran the Chicago White Sox. So super unique kind of thing there. So did that for about a year and decided I wanted to work a quote unquote a real job, maybe put on anything other than a t-shirt and jeans to go to work. And so moved to Washington, D.C., our nation's capital. Worked there for 3 years at both the National Press Club, which is a huge spot in DC for heads of state. If you want to kind of gauge it, the only place more heads of state or people in the worldly control or government have spoke is the Oval Office, and then it's the National Press Club, and then there's about 10 locations in DC. So I met everybody. I met Ahmad Karzai. I met members of U.S. representatives. I met a few of the Kennedys. Nancy Pelosi, I met Putin, I met like famous celebrities, basketball players, all kinds of stuff. So very unique opportunity to really see the other side of food and beverage. And that was a very suit and tie job. I was the assistant banquet manager there and just kind of ran the day-to-day operations of, I think back then, we were probably doing $9 million a year in food and beverage operations. So larger operation there. Wanted to take over my own department. There was an opening at a Westin property down in up in the north part of the city, which is called DuPont Circle. So took that job, was the banquet manager there, led my department. We probably only did about $4 million a year out of that spot. So that was very unique. But again, lots of embassy people. Our embassies were right up the street, so we were constantly seeing people from all kinds of international countries all over the world. Italy, Switzerland, Dubai, Saudi Arabia. I mean, just kind of crazy people all the time. So got stuck in the blizzard of '04 and wanted to get out of DC. Didn't want to see snow for a while. So I called my headhunter, and he hooked me up with a job in Naples, Florida, working at La Playa Beach and Golf Resort as assistant banquet manager again. So I did that for about a year and got hooked up with a guy that said, "Hey, you should really, come to private clubs. Quality of life is way better. It's just an easier way of life. You can really connect with people, blah, blah, blah." So took a job at my first private equity golf club called Gray Oaks Country Club. It's a $30 million a year golf club. We had 54 holes. We did $17 million in food and beverage. So it was a massive operation at the time, and it's still growing today. They're totally privately held. It's one of what we call a platinum club. So it is the highest tier certification those clubs can receive. It's on the same level as like Augusta, basically. So it's one of the top tier clubs in the country. While I was there, I actually acquired my quartermaster sommelier certificate. So I have a wine certification that says that I know X amount of information about wine. I do have the lowest certificate because I never went forward with that, but it's just a unique certificate to have on my resume. Did that for, I think I was there for 3 years, and then moved over to the club at Maria Bay. That was a very, very unique situation. So during the downturn in the economy, this company out of Detroit acquired a beachfront location where they actually owned the beach. And that's very controversial across the country, especially in the state of Florida. But they had the right to own so much of the beachfront, and that was a unique situation for them. So they built a very expensive $165 million, 72 unit beachfront condominium with a pool bar and the whole bang on the front. And really just the only people we catered to were the 72 homeowners. So when I got there, we had 17 units sold, and when I left, we were down to 1 unit left to sell. Those units started at $5 million and went up from there. Most of the unit players that people that I got to meet there were self-made millionaires and billionaires. This was their second and third home. So if you're familiar with anybody in politics, well, not even politics, but Barbara Walters lived in the building, as well as Sean Hannity. So you have people that were there very infrequently, and then you have people that were there like this is their first and second home. So some people would pay $5 million and be at their home 3 or 4 weeks a year. So you do the math on how expensive that is to own that piece of property. But those people were some of the most generous people you'll ever meet. So that was kind of a cool job. Basically, we worked 7 days a week from October to April, and then April to October, we both basically worked 3 days a week. And I was on full salary, so lots of golf, lots of just doing whatever I wanted. Was kind of the name of the game for that job. After that, my wife and I got married, and we decided we didn't want to be residents of the state of Florida anymore. So I took a job in Charleston, South Carolina, which is the same place I went to college, and was the general manager of the Mixed and Bath and Racket Club. Ironically, that's owned by a company that's based out of here in Atlanta, where I am now. And they bought a 17-acre trek in the north part of the Charleston area, and they were converting it to mixed-use space. So we had our private club there. I had a public restaurant. I had a market, and then we had, I think, 10 storefronts that we owned and managed. And then we were building homes, single-family homes on that track. It was basically an investment flip. I think they bought it for $5 million, and they wanted to sell it for 17. So I worked through basically the acquisition and the opening of the club all the way up until the sale through the first owner, or who became the second owner technically. And that was kind of a unique opportunity, t-shirt and shorts every day, working poolside with, in Charleston. So I had a great tan all the time, but worked 80, 90 hours a week, learned heavy. If you're not good at accounting, I would have drowned right there. So the accounting side was very heavy for us, but definitely, managed people, managed the membership, managed a lot of problems there. We were Spanish food on one side and then club restaurant on another. So managing 2 different menus side by side in our kitchen created havoc on the system inside the kitchen. So very, very tough operation there, but very cool experience. And then there's about 8 people from that role that I actually still talk to. I was out with one gentleman last night before, for drinks. So very unique situation there, working for a great company. When I left that job, I actually took a job with the company I am with now, which is Club Corp or Invited Clubs, depending on how you know us. We just changed our name, I think, in May of this year. So as Invited Clubs, we own 230-ish golf clubs around the country and 27 private city clubs like I'm in. So my club is a heavy dining club. So I'm basically a restaurant with a lot of private event space on the backside. So with my restaurant, we do about $5 million a year. 3 million of that derived from food and beverage, and 2 million of that derived from dues line. So this operation is heavy here. But when I joined the company, I was actually one of our smaller clubs in Charleston called the Harbor Club. Then I moved to Capital City Club in Montgomery, Alabama, which is a little bit larger. Then I moved to the Tampa Club in Tampa, Florida, and that club is a little bit larger. And now I'm at one of our 4 largest clubs in our division. So right now I'm the 4th highest dues receiving club in the company. I've taken about $225,000 a month in dues. And we do around about $175,000 in food and beverage operations a month. So my top line revenue is right around $475,000 to $500,000 a month in revenue. So very busy club. I have a staff of over 50 people that do everything from clean the club to bust the club to serve to supervise to manage to sell. So I have a 4-person sales team. 2 people sell memberships, 2 people sell private events. And you know, it's every day is kind of a chaos, really. It's organized chaos. I always tell people, you know, today being election day, we only have 20 covers on the books for lunch, but we could cap out at 50. So like one thing that's really interesting about hospitality in general is, and everybody kind of says this, is no 2 days are the same. Truthfully, it's really no 2 days are even similar. You know, this morning I thought I was going to have an easy day. I walked in, I had a couple contractors here that I'm doing some work with. So like today I'm very regimented on my calendar. So I, you know, have this blocked off till noon. And then at 1 o'clock, I start my meetings for the afternoon, and I'll have meetings with my staff. So this is a very interesting business where at any minute you can kind of flip the switch and have to do something else. I'm kind of shocked no one's knocked on my door yet. It's only been 10 minutes, but that's the kind of day I have. It's like you kind of come in, I kind of tell people I have a checklist. I only want to get 1 or 2 things done because I know that my, you know, window for doing stuff is going to get opened up really hard. So, you know, it's interesting as the days go by, it's like who's going to come in and what are we going to have and what are we going to do? Every day changes. And then like yesterday, you know, at 4 o'clock, I was just kind of done with the day. So called and made some arrangements and left work early. So, you know, that's kind of one of the nice things about the position I'm in now is my schedule isn't, you know, I'm not adhering to an 8 to 5. I really adhere to whatever schedule I need to work. And now with the advent of Zoom and Teams and all those great things, I can actually teleport from home, which is great. I don't take advantage of it because I have 2 massive screens at work and I can do better work from my office. And my wife works from home too. So that creates a lot of chaos in our household if I'm there and she's there because it ruins her day. And unfortunately, I like to have a nice day too. But, you know, so one thing I will say, I was looking at the diversity of the class and it looks like we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 women and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 gentlemen. I believe, is that correct? So what's interesting is when, yeah, I was gonna say I can't see back in the back. But what's interesting is when you look at the diversity of this business, this is a heavily male-dominated business. There's a lot of men. If you look at even our corporate structure, there's a lot of gentlemen in the top tiers of our organization, and there's not a lot of women. So I would say if you are a female looking to pursue this, definitely take advantage of this. This is a place. There's a lot of companies looking to let women lead. My boss is actually a woman, and she is probably one of the 10 highest women in the company. So there's a lot of opportunity for, you know, diversity as far as women moving forward in this business. No offense, I've worked for both women and men. Everybody kind of leads differently, but there's a great opportunity for females to come up in this organization as well as this industry because there's so many people looking to put women on the front of these opportunities. And I mean, if you look at Top Chef these days, which is probably one of the most accurate and business-oriented, if you will, shows on TV that you can kind of watch and see how well those things get projected, is we're still getting at least 50% of those contestants are females, which is great. Like I follow Casey online and Brooke, and those girls are out there killing it with other people. So there's a lot of opportunity for, you know, females in this industry. But, you know, what I enjoy about my job is the day-to-day interactions with my staff. I lead a staff of over 50 people a day. And then, what we do is we basically, when people come into our club, we're servicing them for lunch and dinner and then sending them on their way. So for them, it's really great, to be able to just kind of make their day great, do something that's over the top for them, celebrate a birthday with them, share special moments. So, that's what's kind of unique about the industry is you really get a day-to-day look into people's lives, and you don't have to, do a whole lot to make their day go that much better. So, that's kind of my business in a nutshell. Were there any questions I can ask? So how many people are enrolled in culinary program at Carroll currently?
Maybe 3.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you've got, so if 3 of you are interested and the rest of you are just looking at it as a career opportunity, I would say taking the classes at Carroll helped me get kind of an idea of what I was going to do for this. But I did I do all 4 years of culinary with Mrs. Cullen? I think I did 4 years of whatever the culinary was at the time. I did every year you could. I think I took one class twice my senior year. But basically, if you're interested in it, I would say take all those and get involved in the clubs that are culinary based, and then get in the business and try to learn as much as you can. If you do want to work in front of house and manage and own things like that, my one advice to you would be make sure you understand math and finance heavily. Take accounting 1, take accounting 2, take accounting 3, because you're going to have to take it again in college and you're going to need it. It is shocking how many people at my level and my pay scale cannot operate Excel. It makes me want to ask for more money on my raise every year because it's astounding how many people can't make the columns in Excel wider or can't make a spreadsheet work with basic math. So I will say math and accounting are, if you're not good at those, management will be very tough. It's not impossible for you to do this, but you will have to focus a lot on math and the number side because the accounting is heavy in this business. Just to give you an idea, we are basically, as a GM, I am 100% responsible for the financial outcome of the club every day. So month to month, we, have a performance we have to do what's called EBITDA, earnings before interest, depreciation, amortization, and taxes. So that number is how I'm graded. And my bonus is based on how much money I can accumulate in the year. So putting that out there is knowing what levers I need to pull, knowing what accounts I have to fund, knowing what accounts I have to debit. My accountant comes to me all the time and says, hey, this is this bill. How do you want to pay for this? How do you want to put this in? How do we want to be, repaid for this? How do we want to make this profitable? So constantly in what we call the chart of accounts, in there making debits and credits, going through what we call accounts payable. Your accounts payable is basically anyone you write a check to. So your checkbook or your debit card is what we consider your accounts payable. And then the general ledger is where every transaction for the club is kept. So for our general ledger last month, our general ledger was only like 85 pages, right? It's not even that thick, but it has every transaction. So all the sales are in there, all my expenses for my payroll, all my expenses for anything I buy, napkins, straws, carpet, all that stuff gets in there. And then my rent is in there, my electricity bill, my gas bill, my water bill are all in there. So expensing that, amortizing your rent, so my rent is about $82,000 a month. And so I amortize it down to 75 grand because I can write some of that off as an expense for my business. So I amortize it down to 75. I pay my insurance and I pay my taxes on the facility, and then that gives me an expense for my rent. So, but knowing how to amortize that down, knowing what chart to use, some of that's done by corporate, some of that's, if you're really smart with the numbers and like how the Georgia laws work, like some stuff I've learned is you can actually look for different credits and things in there that help benefit me. So like my budget for my rent is probably $933,000 this year. I will probably only spend about 880 to 890. So I'm going to have a $34,000 or more credit that will go to my bonus line. So when you calculate my bonus, I get paid 20% of my salary as a bonus. The higher I can get it, the more money I can make. So I can cap out at 20%. So, the more money I can hold, the more money I can save, the more money I can spend wisely, the more money I can make at the end of the year. And then I get a nice fat check in the spring. So That's kind of one of the interesting things about this business is the profit line is very thin, but when you work for different companies, they will incentivize you to work very well and make as much money as you can. And then no offense, you can leverage yourself to make more money, which, no offense, that's what we're all here to do is get paid. So I'm, just a little better at it than most. But of the clubs, in our division, I've actually worked at 5 of them. So I also am what we call a specialist. So when there's an issue at some of the other clubs, I get called or I have to travel to other clubs. And, people call me and say, hey, I've got this issue going on. How do you fix this? How do you do this? Do you do this? Do you do this? So in a leadership role such as this, you can really exercise, how to do. So I'm actually like the people that report to me are just the 50 here, but I also have other clubs that I help contribute to. So I know their staff. Then I'm also on the budget committee for our division. So each year, I'm not going this year because of the timing, but each year I travel to Dallas where our HQ is and sit in on budget meetings for our division. So that's kind of an interesting piece of the puzzle because we argue out basically for 4 days straight what clubs are going to produce what. We show it to our ownership, and then they fight back on what they don't like to see and what they do like to see, and then we argue for about 2 days after that and talk about finance, the economy. I mean, this year, just to put it into perspective, right? Like we're seeing an 8.5% inflation marker, and our ownership wants to see a 15% bottom line return on their investment. So they want to see a double push on inflation. Well, if you watch the stock market or you watch anything in the news and you start to see what they're talking about with the economy, as the economy slows, our business is starting to slow. Last month in private events alone, I did $200,000. This month, I'm probably going to be lucky if I hit 75. Now, there's a cushion I have built out there, so I'm going to cash that in and use that. But you see how big my business has swung with the shock of the little bit of inflation news coming from Jerome Powell, raising the interest rate 3 or 4 times in the last year. That's not good for the economy. So like one of the big arguments we had this year was, if the economy slows down, how are we going to be, brought back to talk about our bonuses and budgets and things like that. So, finance is a huge piece of our business, and math is. I mean, I don't care if you're a baker or a chef. You've got to know math to know what your food cost is. You got to know math to know what your fractions are when you're weighing your stuff out. Like, so in the professional baking world, we weigh everything on a scale. We don't use cups or anything like that. There's no cups and tablespoons. It's all weight. So you use a very nice balanced scale to weigh everything. And then when you get into bigger measurements, you get into like basically what we call a feed scale. It's like, I think it's a 35 or 50 pound max scale that hangs from a standardized point, and you throw as much flour into it until you can max out the scale. So, it's just a very diverse business, and this business is giant. Like, if you want to live anywhere in the world, you can always use hospitality as your background. Like I can pick up any time I want, and I can move anywhere in the world and get a job, just because I can either A, wait tables, or B, manage. But I could move to France, I can move to Belize, I can move to Nicaragua, I can move to Saudi Arabia, Dubai. I mean, anywhere in the world will take me because of the hospitality degree and the size of the industry we are. Remember, hospitality doesn't only cover hotels and restaurants and things like that. The airline industry is tucked in there. There's a ton of other industries. Airbnb is technically now housed under hospitality. So there's a ton of other ways hospitality can touch, your life, and you can kind of live anywhere. Once I left Ohio in '98, honestly, I have not lived in Ohio since, but I've lived in DC, Alabama, Georgia, Florida, and South Carolina. But it's, it gives you an opportunity to live anywhere in the world. If you've seen the show Below Deck, you can work on a mega yacht. I have friends that are private chefs in other countries now because of experiences they've had. And one of my friends works for a guy that lives in Switzerland. And his last house that he sold in Switzerland sold for $25 million. The guy had no problem making money. He worked, I think, 6 months on, 6 months off, and probably made a little bit more than I do, but he only works 6 months out of the year, but he's on call 24 hours a day. So, there's some very unique opportunities out there. And, for food and beverage and hospitality. I mean, technically, if you want to think about it, hospitality is also, outside excursions. There's people that I just interviewed a lady for one of the roles. We didn't come to an agreement on her role, but she was an outdoor experience person and she works in hospitality. So she's does ropes course training and, team building and stuff like that. That's all hospitality as well. So the hospitality industry isn't necessarily restaurants and food service all the time. There's a lot of stuff that touches it to make it as big as it is. I think it's the fifth or sixth largest industry in the world right now, but it's massive. And like I always say, you never know who's going to walk through your doors. Here in Atlanta, we have a large music scene, so you kind of never know who's going to come into your place of business. And sometimes you get a heads up, sometimes you don't. We were supposed to have not Jamie Kennedy. God, I can't think of the guy's name. Shoot, it just slipped me. But there was we were supposed to have a supercar meeting here. So these 10 gentlemen from Orlando area that were going to drive their supercars from Orlando to Texas for a race that took place 3 weeks ago. They actually got in the Hurricane Ian. They actually lost 3 cars, but needless to say, one of the they were supposed to bring a rapper up here, and so you just kind of never know who's going to walk in. I had district attorneys from different offices. I've had who was the lady from Michigan, the governor from Michigan that they tried to kidnap. She was in my club a while back. You had the governor's been here a bunch of times. So yeah, you kind of never know who's going to show up at your club. So it's always an interesting, an interesting business because your doors are always open, but you just kind of never know who's gonna walk in on any given day.
Hey, John.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about baking and pastry arts? Because there might be some students in here that are interested, not necessarily in management, but
Sure.
in that area. Can you give them any kind of advice?
Yeah. Yep. So with baking and pastry arts, so I worked at Kiowa Island Resort. I ran a bake shop out there. It's really, again, it's unique because you have a bunch of different facets of that industry. If you go into baking and pastry, the most typical thing you'll work for is either an independent restaurant or a hotel. Those are the 2 big areas where you work. So when you work for like an independent restaurant, like I have a guy that I used to buy from in Charleston, and he is working with Daniel Roland at a place. And all he does is bake bread for him. That's all he does. 50 hours a week is just bake bread for all his entities. And he teaches his team at each location how to do it. So you could do something where you're more or less the person who has the perfect bread recipe and you're working and building them, or you could be, on a 4-diamond 5-star resort and you're baking the pastries and doing the breads for everything at the restaurant and the resort. When I was at Kiowa, we did all the gingerbread houses every year. We had to build and assemble them. And then we also did all the pastries for the resort. But during the holidays, we were doing all the pumpkin pies, pecan pies, all that kind of stuff. So, it's very in depth. I actually, Robert Redford actually walked into my shop when he was taping a film out there back in the day. But it's just one of those things where, recipes are very precise. It's a science, which is why you typically get a BS in baking and pastry arts, because it is a science. There's math, and it's all about weights and measures. But our bake shop, we had what we call a real oven. So imagine an oven as big as a school bus with no wheels on it. And there's 7 or 5 trays in there, and those trays slowly rotate around. And what you do is you basically throw typically like a sourdough roll on there, and each tray holds probably 10 dozen rolls at a time, and you basically pop them in. They do 2 to 5 rotations depending on the temperature of your oven, and then you slide them out, and it's constantly moving. So it's one of those things where like it's dangerous, but it's our bread guys worked overnight because of the humidity in Charleston. So with that, like temperature and humidity can come in play. So they worked at night because the humidity changes. So those guys came in at 11 p.m. and they left the office at 7 a.m. And then I came in at 7 a.m. and worked till 5 or 6 or 7 at night, depending on just the shifts. I did wedding cakes there as well. So if you're into baking and pastry, wedding cakes were huge. If you've ever seen the Wilton's book, I've done every cake in there except for the pineapple cake, just because I used to sell the cakes for the island. So I was the guy that had to meet with the bride, and we would pick out their designs, pick out their colors. I would go in Saturday morning, decorate them, and then deliver them to either a private residence or facilities on the grounds at the hotel. And then I had to coordinate with the executive chef for each outlet on where we were doing and what the delivery was going to look like, whether we needed refrigeration, things like that. So yeah, with baking and pastry arts, I mean, it's breads, it's pastries, it's cakes, it's a lot. I mean, chocolate, I did a lot of chocolate work in my career, especially for the holidays. So we would build these massive displays out of chocolate, glue them together with chocolate, spray them with chocolate. So you know, things like that. So a baking and pastry arts degree is really, like my degree was a cake class from a German master. I did a sugar class. I did a bread class. I did, they do knife classes now because a lot of kids were cutting their hands right out of school. And then there's some book classes, like where you start to learn how to run a restaurant, how to buy your product, how to cost out your product, and stuff like that. So again, math it's super heavy on the math side, but baking and pastry career is, you know, you're typically paid more than an executive chef if you were on the culinary side, because there's not as many of us as there used to be. So your pay is typically a little bit better. You quote unquote don't get as much respect in the kitchen, you know, but you just got to fight your way up. I mean, the joke is we used to plate, you know, as many desserts as they do entrees, and we got no space to plate. So we figured out ways to buy spider racks and things like that to be able to just plate on very small surfaces while the entrees were going out. I mean, when you start to work in kitchens, you'll understand when you have plate ups for 200, space becomes a premium and everybody's fighting for every inch. So, you know, you've got to, no offense, but the entrees get the bigger spot because they go out first. And then we would have to roll in and try to mash it up and get it all on a much smaller surface. So it's very creative, but, you know, there's a lot of respect for what we do. And I think as, you know, people are really kind of going along, less and less of us are doing those cool things. And so people are getting more interested in that. And that's becoming a better, you know, kind of route to take, if you will, if you're not into the full culinary scene. The cool thing about if you just go straight culinary, you know, when you cook, if anybody's cooked at home, you know, recipes are about adjustments, but with baking and pastry arts, there's no adjustments. Because of the science involved, you can't skimp, you can't add, you can't change, you can't add a little bit of this or a little bit of that. That doesn't work in baking and pastry. It's very scientific. One of the classes I took early on was you have to recreate an item that you buy at the store. So the big one is we did chocolate chip cookies, and then you have to create a cookie that's as close to that as you can get it by adjusting and moving ingredients in the recipe. And so when you're moving things, you know, when you're moving baking soda and baking powder and flours and sugars and things, what happens and what's that chemical reaction? So it's a little bit of trial and error and to try to get it as close as you can. And there are some jobs out there that actually people will use to copy recipes. So if you take Toll House as a brand, and then if you take every other generic item in the market, Costco, Walmart, Kroger, Albertsons, all those people that have generics, they want the same recipe. So there are people out there that get paid just to copy recipes. And what they do is they buy an original and then they start working at it in a lab and trying to get it as close as possible. And that becomes the Albertsons or the Costco brand, even though when you buy them, you know, they look exactly and taste almost exactly the same. I mean, Fruit Loops, Cheerios, all those companies pay somebody to try to rip other people off. You just can't make the recipe so close, but you can get it close enough that it's similar. And there's jobs out there that's all they do is they go into labs and they try to find other people's food and pull it apart and then recreate it so that they can be copied and they don't have to pay the rights to it. And that's a whole profession. So if you're, you know, kind of interested in stuff like that, it's scientific and it's mystery. It's problem solving at its best. So there's, you know, all that kind of stuff out there. Were there any other questions I can answer?
Do you suggest hospitality management or regular business management? And did I ask that right?
Yeah. So in my opinion, I would probably do a business management degree at this time. I just think it's a little more versatile. I think as we go more away from technically, I think we're moving away from roles that are more hands-on and going into more tech-based or business operations. A business degree is probably your better option. I don't think anybody looks at my hospitality degree. It doesn't say I don't have a business degree based on what I do, but I would definitely say a business degree is more versatile in the marketplace, and people don't understand what goes into a hospitality degree. So a lot of people ask me, they're like, "Oh, do you have any accounting certifications on your resume?" I don't see anything, and I say no. But if you look at my LinkedIn profile, I have very high Excel certifications. So, yes, I'm not a CPA certified accountant, but I can carry my weight when it comes to doing all the bookwork. So it's just a business degree is more versatile than a hospitality degree. Hospitality, I mean, you could go into hospitality law if you want to do law, with that degree, but that's a good avenue to get your foot in the door and start working that way. And no offense, we kind of like everybody else, we're getting sued all the time. So there's obviously a huge need and an open door for hospitality law students as well.
If they're not interested in management,
Mm-hmm.
what is the best path for them to go to be that chef or to be in pastry arts? Like what?
Yeah, I mean, you just need, I mean, no offense, you don't need a degree to be a chef. Our chef does have a degree. He's extremely young, but he's extremely talented. And I've met a few other chefs that don't have degrees. They're extremely smart and they're head smart in what they do. But what's interesting is you don't have to. I mean, I have a server here who's been here 37 years, just wants to be a server. That's all he wants. He doesn't want any more responsibility. And you can do that. You could be a line cook for the rest of your life. You could be an executive chef at a restaurant for the rest of your life. There's nothing that says you have to move up, right? You don't have to take on more responsibility, in your role. So you could start as a line cook somewhere and move up to executive chef and stay there for the mass majority of your career. There's nothing that says you can't. So really just get your foot in the door, work someplace. I would not recommend doing a stage unless the place is Michelin star rated. So if somebody says, "Oh, you can stage for me for a month and then I'll decide if I want to hire you," don't do that. A stage basically means you work for free for a month. If they're not a Michelin star rated restaurant, don't do it. That's a trap. If they say, "Okay, I need you to stage for a shift," sure, do that. You're going to cut onions, you're going to cut peppers. What they're looking at is your knife skills, how clean do you work, things like that. But if they're asking you to work weeks on end as a stage, and that in French stage means complimentary or free, don't do it unless it's a 1-star Michelin restaurant or 2 or 3-star. I know a guy that staged for 8 months at a 3-star Michelin restaurant. He took in no pay and he worked a full-time job side by side. And then he opened his own place and he's doing extremely well. But that takes, 8 months of working 2 jobs. That's dedication like you have no other. He's extremely gifted, but it's just a tough ride to take. So I would say just get your foot in the door, start as a dishwasher if you don't have a ton of experience, work up to prep cook, then work to line cook to stew to exec, and exec up. But at any point, if you want to stop moving up, you don't have to go up. There's nothing that says you have to be a general manager. There's nothing that says you have to be an owner. You can stop wherever you want. I mean, I have, there's people in our company that have been line cooks for like 17 years. Same role. They don't want to do anything else. They just want us to give them a quality of life increase every year, and they want us to keep doing their job. But some of those guys, they can turn out 60 covers for lunch by themselves. So that's, to me, I'll take that guy over some newbie that thinks he can, change the world with his knife. No way. The guy that's been there for 17 years, he knows everything about every piece of equipment in that kitchen. He knows every substitution sheet in the world. He can serve all those people, and it's one body, and he's reliable, right? And the biggest thing in this industry is to make sure you're reliable. Your word is your bond here. If you say you're gonna be there at 8 and you show up at 9, people aren't gonna respect you, and you're gonna end up losing your role. That's the biggest thing. Is like with this role, if you're gonna say you're gonna do something, you got to do it, and you got to be there. this job does take a lot of toll on you. You work a lot of nights, weekends, and holidays, but it kind of is what it is. When people are out partying, you're kind of working. That is the downside of the industry. But once you get to a certain level and a certain amount of vacation, then you can start taking holidays off, things like that. So, but get your foot in the door, take a dishwashing job at a restaurant that you think is a great place. Watch what they do. Are they clean? Do they work well as a team? Do they, are they helpful leading you? And see what they say. If they don't, if they say, hey, we're a very clean kitchen and we do X, Y, Z, and they don't adhere to that, they're not doing what they're supposed to do. And then you need to go look for someplace else that's more worthy of your expertise in your role. So, that's what I would suggest.
What keeps you motivated in your job? What keeps you going day after day? Why do you do what you do?
My staff and specifically I have members, but mostly my staff. They're here every day. They help me out. They back me up. They, without them, I can't do my job. So I thank them every day for being present. But really, my staff and the members are great. My members are super nice. There's a lot of them that, want to talk to me and have lunch with me and things like that. But that's what keeps me going is my staff and my members. They're here every day. They spend money with us. They have faith in our culinary tribe. They love to high five us when we do things that are over the top, and they love to correct us when we fail at something. If we don't have enough staffing, or we take on too much business, or maybe the food quality wasn't great. So yes, they kind of give you, they'll knock you back in line if you need it. But yeah, staff and the members keep me motivated every day to come, back to the office.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah. If there's anything else you guys need, let me know.
Okay. Thanks again. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Bye.
Take care.